Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining once again. As you all know, I just came back late last night. Beautiful weekend. Together with another 5,000 rabbis. Many of you saw the picture, the iconic picture. There was a meme going around a couple of years ago where you have someone saying, "Doctor, I screamed, I didn't put on tefillin yet, and that's the last thing I remember." But it was a very nice weekend, very invigorating, inspiring for me. Especially the really this year's focus was about Israel, and the banquet, which was a highlight, was we had a connection between our banquet, and there was another 1,400 rabbis who could not come in because of the war in Israel they had there. We heard from the front line, so it was very nice event, very nice weekend. But now looking forward to the coming next couple of weeks, both in this course. Hanukkah is coming up. Today is also Rosh Chodesh. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So tonight's a special night. Tonight and tomorrow, we enter into the month of Kislev, is also called a month of miracles. So it is a special month. So may we all see miracles, and our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel, let them see miracles as well. If you don't have a book, there is books there's a textbook in the back left over there. Okay, as we did last week, we will start off with some Sach of the Torah that we learned for our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel. We also will say a chapter of Tehillim, and we'll dedicate this class in honor of someone who lost their life. So first we will, if you see on the board, if you're able to follow along, you can do. Otherwise, I will say it both in Hebrew or in English. You may recognize the Psalm number 121. Shir Malos, Esa Einai Elaharim, Me'ayin Yavai Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai, Osta Shemayim Ba'aretz, Ayitei Lamot Raglecha, Al Yanum Shomerecha. Hine Lo Yanum V'lo Yishan Shomer Yisrael. Adonai Shomerecha, Adonai Silcha Yad Yiminecha. Yom Mashemesh Le'ekeka V'erech Ba'layla. Adonai Yishmarchem B'korah, Yishmar Es Nafshecha. Adonai Yishmar Tzeisu V'yacha Me'atav Adolam. Song for Ascents. I shall raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the garden of Israel will neither sleep nor slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your shadow. He is by your right hand. By day the sun will not smite you, nor will the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from now and to eternity. So, and may God protect our brothers and sisters, especially those on the front lines right now, in the place of danger. And as we did last week, I'd like to dedicate today's class to another hero of Israel. This is another unique story. Last week we had the soldier who they found the poem. Today's class is dedicated in memory of Lieutenant or Colonel Salman Habaka. Salman Habaka is from the Jews community, which is a Muslim community in Israel, and he is the most senior IDF soldier who has fallen so far. He was in Hebron at the start of the war, but right away when he heard, he went down south, and he was killed while he was defending Kibbutz Be'eri. Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the hardest hit kibbutzim, and this is what his wife requested. I don't know if you're able to read, but I'll read it. Arin, the widow of hero Lieutenant Colonel Salman Habaka, 33, who saved civilians in the battle for Kibbutz Be'eri, and fell Thursday while fighting Hamas in Gaza, has asked that as many Jews as possible attend her husband's funeral. Habaka is a Druze Israeli, and he is the highest ranking officer to be killed since the beginning of the IDF's ground operation. Commander of the 188th Armored Brigade, 53rd Battalion. Habaka was from the Yanujak and the father of a 2-year-old son. Ahead of his funeral, Arin asked that as many Jews as possible, especially from northern Israel, come to pay last respects. In a request, Arin wrote that her husband had always lived alongside the Jews and fought with them. Therefore, she said, it was important to the entire family that the funeral be held before the start of the Jewish Sabbath at sunset on Friday, so the Jews would be able to say an appropriate farewell. I find this such a unique, such a beautiful story, because over here we have, the battle is not just between Jews and between religions. This is the battle between good and bad, between good and evil. And over here we have someone who is not Jewish, but fought alongside and died as a hero for the Jewish people, for the land of Israel, and may his soul find eternal peace. May our learning be as a merit for him, for his family, for all those that will still us. Okay, so Today's class is called The Dawn of Limitation. Now, today I believe is going to be a very interesting class. I very much appreciated this class while learning it, while preparing it. Now, one thing I want to say, maybe I didn't make this clear last week, is that when learning Kabbalah, there is many very abstract ideas, and not always we'll be able to fully understand every single idea. And they say a story that Einstein met with Charlie Chaplin, and Einstein tells me, they've heard this. He says, "What I most admire about your art is your universality. You don't say a word, yet the world understands you." To which Chaplin replies, "True, but your glory is even greater. The whole world admires you, even though they don't understand the word of what you say." So sometimes, sometimes in learning very abstract ideas, we don't understand every idea, but it's important not to get stuck. Now, it's important, obviously, to ask questions is good, but if there's something which you're not necessarily going to fully understand or fully be able to internalize, that's okay. This is the one course where I would say that if you walk out after 6 weeks and saying, "I understood every single concept fully," I'm probably going to do a good job. Because Kabbalah is something which is abstract. Kabbalah is something which is the deepest parts and is, so therefore, again, we will do our best to fully understand what we're saying. But even in Chassidus, even Kabbalah, there's something called Yedias HaMetzios and Yedias HaMahos. Yedias HaMetzios means understanding the idea, the concept. Yedias HaMahos means understanding the essence. Sometimes in Kabbalah, we speak about there's certain areas we're not fully able to understand the full essence. We only understand certain ideas behind it. And therefore, learning Kabbalah, it's important not to get stuck. Important, if there is a part you get stuck, to move on, maybe to return to it. There are also books out there for further reading. But don't let yourself get stuck and kind of not get the rest of what we are going to say, because there are going to be many very beautiful ideas expressed today and the next couple of weeks. So I'll start off with a story. That goes as follows. There was a chassid, a follower of the Alter Rebbe, a wealthy businessman, who one time decided to travel with his wagon driver before Shabbos, and they go to a city. They finally arrive to the city a little bit before Shabbos, and they both retire to their respective rooms. The businessman in his room and the wagon driver in his room. And it's coming Shabbos, and they're going to go to shul. So the businessman goes, and as he's on his way to shul, he encounters a wagon that was stuck in the mud, and the wagon driver is stuck there. And he, who has a good heart, goes and starts trying to pull himself out trying to pull the wagon out of the mud. But he, who's a businessman, doesn't know how to do this. He's just getting more and more stuck, and he's getting further and further in the mud, in the dirt, and finally he just escapes. But he's able to get out. He's not able to succeed in getting the wagon out. He goes and he's fully dirtied up, and his suit is ripped. That was his experience. Meanwhile, the wagon driver goes to shul, and he davens. And as he is finishing, he sees there are people who don't have a place to eat. So he invites them over to his apartment, his hotel room. He goes, but again, this is a wagon driver, doesn't have much food, not a man of means. And he brings them over, and all he has is a few crackers, and everyone goes home hungry. This is the story. It's more of a metaphorical story. What is the point of the story? That if only the wagon driver was the one who was going to help out the person who was stuck in the mud, he would have been successful. And if only the wealthy businessman was the one that was inviting the people over with a lot of food, everyone would have been happy. But instead, they both got lost doing the wrong thing, doing what was not their mission in life. This is, and you can find the story. I said the story, but you can read this in text number 1, page 38, and it goes to this story. And this is a story. This is what we are going to be focusing on today. What is the point of the story? Both the wagon driver and the businessman, were they doing a good thing? Yeah, they were both trying to help out. They were both trying to do a mitzvah. But the point of the story is not every mitzvah, not every good thing is for every single person. Certain people are more equipped for certain areas in life. Everyone has their mission in this world. And then the question becomes, when do we act? And when do we refrain from acting? And again, in this story, they should have switched roles. So this is a question people always are asking. How do I know what my mission in this world is? How should I know? Should I be just laboring for no reason? They say a story of a tailor, someone who was going to try to get a job as a tailor, and is being interviewed. And the person saying, "How much do you want as a salary?" And he says a very high amount. This is a very high amount you're asking for someone who has no experience in being a tailor. To which the guy says, "You don't know how much harder it is doing this without having any idea what I'm doing." So, sometimes in life, the question is, what should we be doing? What should we be focusing on? Because again, there's so many good things out there in this world to be doing. We're talking about today. Right? Today we're in a battle for the Jewish people, and there's so many good things to do. There are people who are going to Israel to volunteer. There are people who are arranging rallies. There are people who are learning, are praying, and there's so much good out there. What should every single one be doing? So, as I said last week, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be taking some Kabbalistic concepts, ideas from Kabbalah, from the most esoteric parts of Torah, and then we will be trying to apply them, trying to figure out how we should be able to act in our own lives. Because as we mentioned last week, Kabbalah and godliness is a mirror into our own souls. So whatever we have by God, we have in our own souls as well. How do we tell them apart? So there are certain possible factors. What would be some possible factors on how you should act, what you should decide to do? So one may be family history, depending on where I grew up, that may be a clue on how I should act. Another one is education, depending on what you went to school to, what you went to, what your expertise is. Another idea people may answer would be the greatest communal need at the moment. That might be a reply. A fourth factor may be just you enjoy it. This is something you enjoy doing, and that would be something which would pull you to a certain area. And finally, would be you are good at it. That would be another. Okay, so this is going to be what we are going to be discussing today. How should a person know? In what areas should they be pursuing in life? Okay, anyone has any comments or questions or something they may suggest? Okay, so today, everyone should have a map. Again, if you don't have a book, there's in the back left, but everyone inside your book should have the map. So last week, we discussed the blue. We spoke about the garments of the soul, if you remember, which is, we spoke about the three lowest worlds, which are called Biyah, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. And this is how we had the evolution of creation, how God makes it able to create this world, this coarse world from God, and in the mirror in our souls, that is our garments of our soul, which are our thought, speech, and action. That's what we spoke about last week. This week, we are going to move on to the green, and that is we are going to speak about this is perhaps the most famous part of Kabbalah, and that is the Sefirot, the 10 Sefirot. Also, we are going to be discussing the world of Atzilus, which is the highest of the worlds, or what we spoke about last week is more a realm, more a concept. And when we speak about the world, so how many worlds are there? So we said there's 4 worlds. Last week we spoke about 3 worlds, and tonight we're going to speak about the 4th world. But although we call them 4 worlds, as we're going to go on, we're going to see that this world is qualitatively and quantitatively completely different from the 3 worlds below it. This is a completely different type of world, and that is what we are going to be discussing this week. So, what did we discuss last week? Last week we discussed the garments of the soul. Yeah, we spoke about how our thought, speech, and action, they are not who we are. But today we are going to be moving up one level, and we are going to be called the Kochot HaNefesh. What are the Kochot HaNefesh? If you see, this is going to be every single week. There's going to be some key terms that we're going to be learning. You see on page 40, key term 2.1, Kochot HaNefesh. These are the soul power. This is not like a garment, which is not who you are. These are the characteristics. These are the characteristics of who you are, what your tendencies are. And this is more who you are. So we are going to start with the divine, and then slowly bring it down into our world. Slowly bring it down into this world and into our own life, into our own bodies, and some different lessons that we can learn from that. So we are going to start with the world of Atzilut. What is the world of Atzilut? The highest world, the highest realm. This is the realm called emanation. Atzilut literally means the emanation. What is this world? So we're going to read a text, and then we are going to maybe go get sidetracked a little bit with a philosophical question. Let's take a look at text number 2. Text number 2 on page 41. Sharon, go ahead. So the Alter Rebbe, who was a real mystic, for me and you, to say the word Atzilus, we could say it. It doesn't really mean that much for us, even if we understand what it's saying. But again, we are in this world. But for a real mystic who understands what they're saying, when they say something, they're experiencing it. And because he understood what Atzilus represented, this world, he didn't have the ability to say it out. Now, he didn't have this issue when referencing the 3 lower worlds we discussed last week. Our garments, which is the worlds of Yitzhak. Specifically, when it came to the world of Atzilut, through understanding what it represented, that caused him to, so to say, recoil. He wasn't able to fully say the word. Okay, so what is this world? What is this world? Why did the Alter Rebbe have such reverence to this world? So now we will, again, take a step back from Atzilus and kind of focus on something else. We're going to ask a philosophical question now, which has been asked throughout the ages. And the question is as follows. Take a look at the board. Can we say that God is kind, mighty, and wise? Are we able to describe God? And again, what the question is, not does God do kind things? Does God do mighty actions? Or does God do wise things? But can we describe God? Can we define God as someone who is kind, as someone who is wise, as someone who is mighty? Is this something which we could do, or there's a problem with doing this? Anyone wants to? Okay, so you're saying just like we have those, and that kind of describes us, we can define someone as this is a wise person. Correct, very good. Again, we are a mirror to God, as we said. So just like you could describe someone, define someone as that, that would be a reason to say yes, you can define God by saying that God is kind. Anyone has anything else, or? Why would we say no? Very good. Okay, very good. So you guys both said both sides of the coin. And that is, on the one hand, we find many times throughout the Torah describing God in these descriptive terms, as God is a kind God, God is a wise. And not only that, as we're going to see, certain texts seem to support, as we're going to read, the idea that we could describe God with certain attributes. On the other hand, the Sharon is saying, once you're saying God is kind, you're limiting God. Again, all of these attributes, kindness, wisdom, might, that is all creation. That is all something which God created. God is infinite. How are we able to take God and put a definition on God? So this is something which both Kabbalists, and not only Kabbalists, philosophers, Jewish philosophers, have struggled with throughout all generations. Again, can we say that God is kind, mighty, and wise, or the immanence who bears specific, well, the immanence one who bears specific praiseworthy attributes? So let's take a look at text number 3. This comes from Proverbs. God with wisdom founded the earth, with understanding established the heavens, with his knowledge the depth was split. Over here we have a certain characteristic of God. The next verse, text number 4, this is a very famous one. We say it every single day. We also say it when we take out the Torah. What is the verse saying? Unto you, God, is greatness and power and beauty and triumph and splendor, for all in heaven and earth is yours. Unto you, God, is kingship. So over here we have two verses which clearly seem to be saying we can refer to God by certain descriptive, powers. On the other hand, we have another verse, and then another text, which just comes from the Maharal and says as follows: one of the terms we refer to when we speak about God is Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he who is blessed, he who is holy. Now, what does Kadosh mean? What does the word Kadosh mean? Holy. Kadosh means, we say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh means holy. But as we spoke about this at a breakfast maybe a couple months ago. This is a certain translation, but it's not the full translation. Because the word holy, as we spoke about a couple months ago, there's a verse in Torah which describes a prostitute as a female and male prostitute as a kadosh, kedesha. They're not holy. So what? So obviously the word. So obviously it can't just mean holy. So what does the word kadosh mean? Separate. Very good. Separate. Separate. That which is separated from us. Now, separated could be for the positive or for the negative. So a male or female prostitute is separated for immorality, for negative, for that which is promiscuous. When we speak about in the divine, in the holy, a person can separate themselves in that which is good. When we speak about marriage, under the chuppah, there is what's called the kiddushin, the betrothal. What is betrothal? What is kiddushin? We're saying that the man is saying, you are separated to me. We are going to become one, and we are again. There is a sort of separation now. The husband and wife become separated from anyone else. Now they are one. So the real idea of kadosh, of kiddushin, is that which is separated. Why do we refer to Hashem as Hakadosh Baruch Hu? Because God is that which is separated, which is not, you can't define God. God is infinite. God is unlimited. Once you are going to start putting limitations on God, saying God is kind, you're already defining God. Let's see text number 5. Our sages purposely refer to God as Kadosh, the Holy One, blessed be He, as opposed to the Intelligent One, blessed be He. For God's true self is unknowable. All that we know about God is that He is detached from and beyond every form of physicality and any existing entity. It is therefore appropriate to refer to God as the Holy One, for the term Kadosh describes an entity that is transcendent. Indeed, God is Pishitut, the ultimate abstract simplicity. Over here we have a very important Kabbalistic idea. That once we start putting definitions on God, that's so to say taking God from his simplicity, from his that which is infinite, and putting some sort of description on it. That you can't do. God is beyond all that. So over here it seems like that we can't put any description on God. So which one's correct? Again, we have verses which seem to be putting descriptions on God. As Karen was saying, we were created in God's image, and we have those. So does not. And again, it seems like we have verses supporting. On the other hand, God is that which you can't define. Yeah. So they say the story of the two people who come in front of the rabbi, and one says his story, and the rabbi says, "You're right." The other one says, argues with his story, and the rabbi says, "You're right." And his wife from the other room says, "Well, how can they both be right?" The rabbi said, "You're also right." Sometimes everyone's right, but the question is, how can they both be right? Can we define God, or can we not define God? And in order to answer this question, we come to one of the essential ideas of Kabbalah. And that is, the answer is given by the way of a parable. Now, it's always important to understand, especially when we're talking about very high ideas, very Kabbalistic and abstract ideas, and we're talking about God, don't take not every single aspect of the parable will necessarily fit with what we're trying to refer to, but certain aspects in the parable will help us understand how we can help us understand this idea. And the way the answer is given by means of the following example, the following parable. You have a genius. A genius. Once heard, what is the definition of a genius? Someone with an average mind with a Jewish mother. So a genius is invited to go speak somewhere. Let's take Einstein. Einstein is invited to go speak to fourth graders, a class of fourth graders. He comes to the class, and if he's going to speak his wisdom, let's talk about the theory of relativity. The class will have no idea what he's saying. So he has two options. One option is we're getting everything in his world and saying his story, saying his biography, where he grew up, where he was born, where he studied. That's one option. What would be another option? A second option is, because again, if he does the first option, he may be a good speaker, he may be interesting, but that's not describing who he is to the students. That's just saying his story. That's not telling us, that won't be telling the students the greatness of who he is. The second is if this genius, this Einstein, is able to condense his wisdom, find in this theory of relativity one area where he can bring it down to make a 9-year-old child understand. Now that's something which is not easy to do. Be able to find that point. We're talking about the deepest concepts. To find that area where he can now bring it down, lower himself to explain it to a little child. Now, the loftier the idea, the harder it is to condense. The higher, the more abstract you get, the harder it is to condense. Now, when this genius is able to condense it, is this a lack in him? Is this a flaw in that person? To the contrary, the greater, if you're not able to condense yourself, that's the flaw. The greater you are, the greater of a genius you are, the more you are able to now find that connection point, to be able to now relate to someone underneath you, to that child who wouldn't be able to understand you in another way. Now, this is the way Kabbalah explains our relationship with God. Now, when we speak about our relationship with our distance to Hashem, our distance is a lot further to Hashem than the greatest genius to a 5-year-old. Because again, the genius and a 5-year-old are both human beings who both have a mind. Now, one has a lot more of a lot higher of IQ and but when we're talking about us and God, we are creations and God is infinite. So however far the distance is between the Einstein and the 9-year-old, a lot greater is the distance between us as humans and God. So now, when we speak about, just like when we have that genius who condenses his mind, and now he lowers himself. Now, once the child understands the concept, can he say now, I understand Einstein? Obviously not. If a 9-year-old comes out of our presentation with that one small idea that Einstein managed to compress, the child can't say they fully understand Einstein. But what they did do was they found a way to connect. They found the element, how to be able to make a connection between this 9-year-old and this Einstein. Now, this answers the question. We asked the question before. Can we define Hashem? Can we put on God a description of that which is kind, that which is wise? The answer is that, can we define Hashem in God's essence, in Hashem's essence? No. But Hashem wanted to have a relationship with ourselves. So God condensed himself. Hashem lowered himself in order to be able to make that connection point. Now, Hashem didn't condense his whole self, but a small portion, a small aspect of Hashem, of God, he condensed in order that we can now have a connection. Now, can I say now I understand Hashem? Obviously, no. Just like that 9-year-old doesn't understand Einstein. But is there that connection point? That connection point is over there. Now we see over here. There are two truths over here. One, God is transcendent, has no attribute, is ungraspable. That is God in his essence. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is how God is Kadosh, how God is separate. But then we have God ornaments himself with 10 definable and limited attributes. These are the 10 sefirot. This is how Kabbalah explains this inherent contradiction. If we're able to, if God is definable, God is not definable in God's essence. But as God then lowers himself, then we can have that connection with Hashem. Right? Again, Hashem and God's essence is beyond anything, beyond any description. Once God does this act of condensing himself, then we are able to focus on certain areas. And that's going to be the 10 sefirot, which we're going to discuss right now. Yes. We're going to get there. We're going to get to what sefirot mean, and that's going to also explain why that becomes the area of definition in God. Let's take a look at text number 6, which explains this two truths. It comes from the Zohar, page number 45. Susan, go ahead.
You are the one who was blessed.
So here we have the idea concept, the famous Kabbalistic concept of the 10 sefirot. This is the first area where God defines himself, where God says, I am going to go from that which is unlimited, undefined, to be able to have a relationship with this world. I want to define myself. And this is so important. It's not, if we're talking, we speak about our relationship with Hashem. It's not just one-sided. It's a relationship. But if we want to have a relationship, we want to be able to understand, our spouse. We want to be able to understand us. If God would not have condensed himself, we wouldn't be able to understand. They see the story of a man who's on the beach and chances upon, a genie. And the genie says, you have one wish. And then says, I want you to, I live in Texas, I want you to build for me over the ocean a bridge. I could get to, this resort in Texas, in Mexico. Genie says, that's a little bit above that. That's very complicated. I didn't need that. So the person said, okay, if you can't do that, I'd like you to be able to give me the knowledge to be able to fully understand my wife. So the genie replies, that highway you were talking about, you want 2 lanes or 4 lanes? So when we speak about a relationship, we want to be able to fully understand, we want to be able to have a connection, be able to understand. So when we speak about our connection with Hashem, there has to be something which is defined. And that's why God lowers himself, condenses himself into these 10 sefirot. Now it's important to note, this is very different than what we spoke about last week. Last week, we spoke about those 3 worlds, Biyah, which we call the garments of the soul. That's not who you are. Our thought, speech, and action are external from us. We spoke about the worlds of Bri, Yitzira, Asiya, as those are worlds which are independent from God. Remember, certain worlds are, the lowest world is the most independent, and a little bit less is going up, but they're all independent. You remember we spoke about the 3 children. You have the toddler, the child, the teenager, but each one of them, what is the common denominator? Is that they're independent from the parent. They're a separate entity from the parent. Some feel it more than others. When it comes to Atzilut, and this is why it's a whole different type of world. It's not a separate entity. This is a part of God. This is how God took himself and lowered himself. But it is still a part of God. This is where God took himself that which was undefined, and made himself defined. This answers what Baruch asked. Baruch asked, why is it called the Sephirot? Talk about the 10 Sephirot. What does Sephirot mean? Sephirot has many different meanings. One of them is that which shines, because the 10 Sephirot are which shine into this world. But one of the reasons it's called the 10th of the Sephirot is text number 7. This comes from the Ramak or Moshe Devero. Some have linked the word Sephirot to the word Mispar, which is number, which indicates a state of finitude. Until God condenses himself, God is infinite. There would be no way of having any connection. At this point, when God says, I want to make a connection to the lower worlds, and that is the first connection point. That is the first area where God becomes finite. And this brings us to our next key term, 2.3 on page 46. The word Sephirot, again, you may have heard this concept before, the 10 Sephirot. What does it mean? These are numbered entities. These are 10 specific, definable attributes that God manifested from his infinite self. Now, again, I just want to repeat a little bit and say it in different words, just to make sure we understand. Kabbalists explain, we speak about godliness. What's godliness? Is it God? So Kabbalists explain this is the difference between God, when we think about God, and godliness. Or as I one time heard someone say, godliness is God with a last name. God is undefinable. When we speak about God in his essence, can't define that. Godliness is where already he lowers himself to become definable. Similar to a person who has characteristics. You have a wise person. You have a smart person. You have a generous person. Is that who they are? That's not who they are. That's not their essence. But can you define the person by that? Can you understand certain aspects of the person like that? Yes, it's a part of who the person is. It's not their essence, but it is a way of defining the person. Again, the clothing a person has, that's changeable. That's something which was last week. That is something external to the person. My characteristics, my definitions, that's not my essence, but it's how I could define myself. When we speak about can we define God, that is something which, not how God is in his essence, how God decides to make that connection. God is able to have that definition. And again, as I mentioned before, this is not a flaw in Hashem. This is not how God is, so to say, limited, but this is how God is completely limitless. And why is that? And here we come up with a famous line in Kabbalah. Line number 8. The infinite one is perfect without any flaw. Should you assert that he has infinite power but lacks the power of finitude, you deny his perfection. Here's a very deep idea, and that is, if you were going to say God is so limitless, he can't limit himself, that itself is a limit. By saying, again, let's go back to the genius. If the genius is so deep and abstract that he can't lower himself to a 5-year-old, is that a limit? That's a limit. He is so deep, he can't express himself to a 5-year-old. When we speak about God, if we are to say that God cannot become limited, that's putting a box around God. God is so transcendent that God can transcend transcendence. Does that make sense? Again, God is so transcendent that he can transcend being transcendent. If you're going to say God is only transcendent and can't become defined, putting a limit on that. The world of Atzilut is taking yourself and being able to lower yourself. So I did some arts and crafts today in order to prepare for this class. And that is, let's take this paper. This paper, nothing on this paper, right? It's a blank canvas of paper. Now, what? Both sides. Now, completely undefined, simple, nothing there. Now, if I wanted to have some words on this piece of paper, how would I do that? So one way, taking some ink and writing something on this paper. Now, by doing that, is the ink and the paper the same? No, they may be connected. you have the paper. You have. What would be another way of getting some words on this paper? Again, that's a separate entity. What does it say right now? Sefirot. Now, did I add anything to this piece of paper? What did I do to this piece of paper? I just took that which was undefined and threw something outside of it. Now I see the word Sefirot on the paper in pink. But I didn't add anything to it. This is God, unlimited, undefined. But God wanted to have a connection with us. So God lowered himself, was able to put some definition. Now, these letters, are these separate from the paper? No, it is the paper. What you see, again, over here in the example, you have this white piece of paper around it. But again, the words that you see in the pink, that's part of that is part of this. So over here you have the Sefirot. How maybe once they become defined, they are still a part of God. But they are the part of God, how it went from that which was just undefined to becoming defined. This is they also show this a little bit in the PowerPoint. You have a blank piece of paper. Now, one way, blank canvas. You could write the word Sefirot on it. Again, over here you have two separate entities. That is one option. The second option is just putting on the blank canvas a black covering. And now what you see is the white from behind. This is the idea of Atzilus, the highest world. Is it God? It's a part of God. But it's a part of God, how God lowered himself to be able to have a definition. And that is another reason, you asked before, why is it called Sefirot? Because Sefirot has the word of Mispar, which means a number, a certain level of being finite. That's also why it's called Atzilut. What does Atzilut mean? Atzilut means emanation. Let's take a look at text number 9b. The Sefirot are called Atzilut, not Bariah. The term Atzilut in the Torah means emanation, which indicates that the Sefirot are an emanation from God's infinity, not an independent creation. This provides us with a second reason for referring to the Sefirot as Atzilut, from the etymological root Eitzel, meaning together with God. We're giving two reasons now why it's called Atzilut. Atzilut means emanation. Let's take a look at that which emanates, a light. The light that comes from a light bulb. Is it separated from the light bulb, the luminary? No. If you separate it, then it's not going to give any light. Again, the light that's coming from the RTV, it's connected to the luminary. If I would separate them, I put a paper above it, it wouldn't give off any light. So here you have that which emanates is one with the luminary. Again, same idea. The 10 Sefirot are one with God. And also, that was the first idea. Secondly, Eitzel means that which is near, that which is next to. Because the 10 Sefirot are not distant, are not external from God. They are a part of God. Again, this is different than we spoke about last week with the three worlds, external worlds, which are separate, independent from God. Yes? Because if there's no definition, then there's no way for us to be able to have any connection with God. Right? Because we're not going to be able to fully understand God, but if we want to be able to have any form of connection in the relationship, there has to be that connection point. Even if we speak about sometimes we can't fully understand God's ways, we still want to be able to. When we pray to God that does kindness, that does created us. Those are all terms of this definition of what God has done for this world. God, throughout the whole Torah, we speak about God, what God is. Those are all definitions. if we want to be able to have any connection with God, God would have to define himself. We're going to speak about how God also, in order to create this world, God has to define himself. Otherwise, there will be no way of creating a physical world. But if at any time, if God would have remained by the undefined, then it would be that Einstein who was giving the theory of relativity in its full glory to the 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old is not going to have any connection. I have no idea what he's talking about. We'll never have any connection with it. God created this world in order to have a connection with us finite human beings. So therefore, God has to define himself, has to limit himself in order to make that connection. Marcus, you had a question before? No.
Everything is God.
Right.
Your definition.
But so
Everybody. That's
right, but he's saying in the Jewish belief, in the Kabbalistic belief. So what you're saying, everything is godliness. We spoke about the difference between God in his essence, and godliness, that which is in God's image, that which is already a defined form of God. That's what we're talking about over here. The 10 Sephirot are how God already comes in a form of definition. Now, this brings us to brings us to the key term 2.4, which is the term of Atzilut, which is emanation, togetherness, God's emanation of the 10 Sephirot, attributes of divine, the finite expression. So this is what we have over here. We have that which is, you can have something which is separate. Separate is the three lowest worlds. That is the garments of God. That is how God creates that which is independent from God. Then you have that which is integral. Again, a person's hand is integral to who they are. Is a person their hand? A person is not their hand. It's integral to who they are. And then you have who you are, your essence. So that last week, we spoke about that which is separate from a person, your clothing. The lower three worlds. How God comes from that which is infinite, and God makes that which is independent, that which seems independent from God. These worlds which there's evil in. Then you have today we're discussing that which is integral. Who you are, not who you are, but expressions of yourself, your hand, your feet, your ability to think, your kindness, that is integral to who you are. It's not who you are. And then there is you. Next week, we'll be speaking about the essence of a person, the essence of God, the Orient Sof, which you may have heard that term before, the infinite light of God, who you are. But today we're discussing that which is the integral, or Atzilut is part of divine entity. Huh? Identity. So this is the concept of the 10 Sephirot. Let's speak a little bit now. Let's bring this down a little bit. I think now it's going to become a little bit more down into our world, even if this was a little bit abstract till now. Let's bring this down a little bit, lower it a little bit, so we can bring it into that which is more tangible. Let's discuss the 10 Sephirot and how they relate to us. So if you take a look at figure 2.1, which you can find on page 53, we have the 10 Sephirot. We have the three higher ones, which are the intellectual, and we have the last 7, which are emotive, which are our emotions. Today, because we're not going to be able to focus on all of them, we will focus on that which it speaks about is how God created this world, and everything else is a subset of those. And we are going to discuss the 3 emotive: chesed, kindness, gevura. Again, in 2.1 it's 4, 5, and 6. Chesed, kindness, gevura, which is strength, and tiferet, which means beauty. Let's speak about them and how they relate to our own lives, to our own sense of our own 10 Sephirot that we have inside of us. So what is chesed? What is chesed? Chesed is giving. That which kindness, that which is giving. Gevura is withholding. a certain strength, a certain judgment. And Tiferes is the harmonization of these two above ones. Let's give a scenario, which I believe in this scenario, we can really see this idea of these three midos, these three emotions. Let's say you're driving down the street. You're driving down the street, and there's someone on a street corner who is homeless, and is asking for $1. I'm not going to ask you how you would respond, but what are different ways, legitimate ways of responding to such a request? One is giving. The person asks for $1. I'm not going to ask too many questions. I'm someone who cares about other people. I am going to give $1. Okay, giving something to eat. Because why? I don't want it to misuse it. Okay, very good. Yeah.
What do you see?
Okay. Okay. So that is an approach of chesed. That is the approach of chesed. That I'm not going to try to figure out why the person is or what the person is going to do with it. A person wants, I am going to give. That is a certain personality. Gevura is a more exacting, a certain, why is the person asking? Why? What will they be using for? Also, what is the message I'm sending by giving him $1? Maybe the person should be getting a job. By me giving him $1, he's going to become reliant on it. He's going to keep on asking. That is more. Again, they're both legitimate. That is more gevura. That is more being exacting, more of a form of judgment. Again, we're not talking about that's someone who doesn't care. We're talking about someone who cares. Two people who care. One person just has someone asks, I'm going to give. And another person will be more exacting than the person. Now, what's interesting is generally people think about chesed, someone kindness, is more about the other person. But Kabbalah really says the exact opposite is true. Someone who is truly kind has chesed. It's not about the other person. It's about my need to give. I always have a need to give. And therefore, if the other person is asking, I don't care his reasons. I don't care what he needs it for. I have that desire to give. It's about me. We a couple of weeks ago, we read in the Torah portion, about Avraham, who epitomized the idea of chesed. It says he was just right after his bris milah, circumcision, and he's standing outside, and it says he's pained that there's no guests. They're coming. He had an open tent, and till God causes that angel to come. Now, why would a person be pained if there's no one to give to? One thing, if there's someone to give to, I'll be happy to give, but I should be pained if there's no one to give to. No one needs. But again, the person who epitomizes the idea of chesed, kindness, it's not about the other person. It's about my need to give. I have that feeling I always need to be giving for myself. Gevura is the other way around. Gevura is not about me. Gevura is about you. Being exacting. Do you deserve it? Is it justice to give you? What will be the message by giving it to you? So Gevura is more focusing on the person, on the beneficiary. Chesed is more about the giver. Gevura is more about me focusing on the receiver. Then we have chesed, kindness, and love. It's to give and to share. It's without restraint. Just give. Will a person be misusing it? Will he be abusing it? Perhaps. But it's my nature to give. And it's the need of the giver. Yes? Sometimes, yes, it's brought down. Sometimes if a person does chesed without any restraint, it could be selfish. It could be just about me. And if a person gives too much, a very strong idea is parenting. When it comes to parenting, you have to have both of these ideas, because if a person is going to give to his children whatever they ask for, that's not good. as you're saying, that's selfish because you're going to raise up your child not being able to hear the word no. When it comes to parenting, many times you have to know when to cut back, when to say, not at this point. So you're right, chesed, if it's going to be abused, just complete chesed without any gevura, you're right, that could be selfish. What is gevura? Gevura is the other way. Gevura is strength. Gevura is restraint and discipline. It is about calculated giving, and it's about the beneficiary. It's about, does that person deserve it? Again, it's important to recognize. People think of chesed as the ultimate. We need gevura just as much as you need chesed. You need boundaries in life, and you need to be able to sometimes say no. If a person is all about just giving, that itself can be a flaw. And what is tiferes? Tiferes is, what does tiferes literally mean? Tiferes literally means beauty. What is something which is beautiful? Something which is beautiful is that which is able to combine colors. You know, one thing, something which is one color, very beautiful. Be able to put together different colors, that also makes something beautiful. Tiferes is beauty, which means it combines chesed and gevura. It's able to say, I want to give, but I'm also looking at the beneficiary, seeing if the person deserves it. And then based on the way I look at the beneficiary, I give in a certain way. And I like what Mike said before. Mike said, you go down the street and you see a person who's asking for $1. Chesed says, give him $1. Who cares what he's going to use it for? Gevura says, who says maybe he'll go and use it to buy drugs. Tiferes says, I'm looking at the person. He's saying he needs $1 because he's hungry. Instead of giving him $1, I'm now going to go to the store and buy him a meal. That's, again, using chesed and gevura, putting it together, and you come out with tiferes. And that's why Kabbalah explains tiferes, while it's in between them, it is more tilted towards chesed. It's more tilted towards giving while looking at the needs of the beneficiary and being able to see, does the person deserve it? If the person doesn't deserve it, can I do it in a way that will work with what the person has? What again, as you said, maybe give him a meal. This is tiferes. Tiferes is beauty, harmonization, combination of chesed and gevura. So these are 3 of the 10 sefirot. When we speak about how God defines himself, in order to be able to create this world, God had to say, I'm going to have these 10 sefirot, these 10 acts of, or these 10 definitions. I'll be able to create this world with some kindness in there, some severity, some strength inside there, and some tiferes, and some netzach, some of the rest of the 10 sefirot. Let's take a look at text 11. Page number 55. Alan. Without even if no need. Here we have how God, and it says the whole world was created through these 3 attributes. Again, the 10 sefirot, but we speak every one of the attributes come from these 3. The other 7 are an arm, or a leg, are an offshoot of these 3. These are the. That's why if you take a look at your map, you see it's in rows of 3. There's 3 rows going down because again, you have chesed, gevura, tiferes. You have one on the right, one on the left. Chesed is considered more to the right. Again, right is sort of kindness. Gevura is to the left, there's sort of more strength, severity, and tiferes is down the middle because tiferes is taking a combination of both of them and being able to use both of them to be able to then ultimately give when looking at the person. So, what is a famous story which brings out this idea of chesed and gevura? There's a very famous story out there. You may have heard this story. The story of Shammai and Hillel. That is, there was a convert that came to Shammai and Hillel. And let's take a look. Let's take it in its source. Text number 12. This is from Talmud Shabbat. It says this. The story goes as follows: a non-Jewish man once approached Shammai and told him, "I would like you to convert me to Judaism on the condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I stand on one foot." Shammai used the building's measuring tool he was holding to chase the fellow away. Shammai pretty much said, "What are you doing? Leave here." The prospective convert then approached Hillel with the same request. Hillel converted him, telling him, "Whatever you hate being done to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn this." On a very basic sense. We're not going to get into what Hillel told him, that line. But on a very basic sense, many people read this story, and it seems like the story of someone who is a kind person and someone who's an impatient person. But the truth is, if you take a look at the story, Shammai is not impatient. Actually, I would say most people would respond to the way Shammai responded. Imagine a mathematician, and someone comes over to him and says, "Teach me all math while I'm standing on one foot." You're obviously not a serious person. You're obviously not someone who's willing to learn. Shammai represented Gevurah, that which is exacting. Is this person right now deserving of being taught that, being converting? No, this person's not a serious person. Hillel, on the other hand, was a person who was giving. And again, the giver is not about the person if they deserve it. It's about me. A person is asking me. He may not deserve it. I want to give. And this is two different ways of dealing with someone. Of dealing with someone, you have the way of Gevurah, you have the way of Chesed, you have the way of Gevurah, and again, these are just two different legitimate methods of going through life. So this is if we take a look at key term 2.6, 2.7, 2.8, we have Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes. I'm not going to read them inside. We already went through them. Now, when we speak about the 10 Sefirot, this is how Hashem created. This is how Hashem created the world and sustains the world with these 10 Sefirot. Again, the 10 Sefirot are God defined himself, and then God said, using these 10 definitions of who I am now going to create this world. And therefore, in this world, you have certain areas which is more chesed based. These certain areas which are more gevurah based. God takes the 10 Sefirot combines to create all that is. Yeah, but if you take a look at figure 2.2, very interesting. Not going to go through all of them, but you see, in this world, there are certain areas which are more chesed, certain areas which are more gevurah. Water is that which makes things grow. That is more chesed. Fire, it has more of a characteristic of gevurah, of strength. Light is that which it makes things grow. That is something which allows people to appreciate the beauty. That is more chesed, has the dominance of chesed. Darkness is the lack of light. That is more gevurah. You have sweetness or bitterness. This is already getting more Kabbalistic. Silver has in Hebrew is nichso nechsafti, which means a certain desire, appreciation of something. Which again, so you see over here, we have many different areas in this world, and every single thing in this world was created through a combination of the 10 Sefirot. This table, and I have no idea what this phone is created out of. But a Kabbalist would be able to tell you, taking the 10 Sefirot, a real mystic, how a table was created. Again, using a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one, and more dominant in this one, less dominant in that one. And through the 10 Sefirot, God then is able to create the whole world. And this is, again, without definition, there can be no creation. Because in order to create a world which is outside of God, to be able to have a connection with God, you have to have some sort of definition. So God takes who he is, and is unlimited, and is undefined, and God says, I want to condense it. God condensed himself to make these 10 Sefirot, and then God creates the world using these 10 Sefirot. And this is Atzilut, the world of Atzilut, which is a part of God, but it's how God lowers himself to define himself. Okay, any questions before we move on? That's gonna be the next thing that we are going to do, which is try to resonate with try to be able to resonate with one of the Sephirot, be able to figure out what we are more, what more expresses who we are. So now that we speak about, again, now we cover the Kabbalistic idea. Again, there was nothingness. There was that which was undefined. God was a blank piece of paper. Then God wanted to create a world. So God has to define himself, lower himself in order to have a connection to this world. So God makes the 10 Sephirot, those definitions, in order then to create this world. You know, an example I wanted to say before, but it slipped my mind, was that you have a stamp. If the stamp has nothing protruding on the ink, what's going to happen? It's going to be a blob of ink. You want to be able to create something on what you're stamping. What has to be? It has to be certain defined lines. Again, otherwise, if it's just a blank ink and you stamp it down, it's going to be a blob of ink. If there would be no definition of God, God can't create a world of definition. In order to be able to create this world which is defined, God has to first define himself. And that is the 10 Sephirot. That is making the different protruding lines on the stamp to then stamp this world, to be able to make this world which is separate. So let's bring this down into our world and take some, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the course, every single aspect we're learning is not just to be abstract, not just to be in a higher world, but everything is supposed to be brought down into this world and to be able to learn out how I could take up something practical from this. So there are 3 points. We have time. There are 3 points that we can learn out from this discussion of Atzilut and the 10 Sephirot. The first point is that which we say every single morning. This is in the morning prayers. Every single morning in the davening. A very powerful prayer. Something which I recommend people say, there's different prayers which are standout. Different prayers, the Modani is a beautiful prayer. People say it. The Shema, the Amida, certain prayers. This is a beautiful prayer that we say every single morning. You can find this in text 13. Text 13, Mordechai, page 59. Say, Elokai, my God, Neshama Shanasata be the soul you gave me Tahor Tahor is pure. Then we say, After Barasa, after Yatsarta, after Nafachta be. These latter 3 expressions, you remember from last week, Barasa is Bria, Yitzira Asiya, the 3 lower worlds, our thought, speech, and action. These are the 3 lower definitions, that which is external to us. What do we start off by saying? The soul you gave us is pure. What are we saying over there? We are saying that we are God. The soul you gave us is imprinted with God. We are not just creations like any other creations. We have God's DNA. Unlike other creations where God created that which is separate from God, the human being has God's DNA. And that is why we are always godly. We are always pure, no matter what a person does throughout their life. A person can live their life, a life of impurity, but they will always have the DNA of God. You have a child who lives their whole life opposite everything their parents taught them. Completely, not listening to a word what their parents brought them up with. At the end of the day, is the child have the parents' DNA? Yes. They can't separate that. We start off every single morning by saying the soul you gave us is pure, because our soul comes from this world of Atzilut, has that godly part to it, and no matter what a person, will do, that will not change who they are. That ultimately we are godly. And again, when we say godly, that's talking about above creation, above our garments, the three lower worlds. We have those 10 sefirot imprinted in us, the DNA of God. This is the pure soul. We have that which is created, Beria, that which is formed, Yetzira, that which is breathed into me, Asiya. Those are the three descriptions we say. Top of that, the soul is pure, and this is Atzilut. Well, again, throughout the day, we may say certain things, we may think certain things, and we may do certain things which go against God. Those are thought, speech, and expression. Those are all that which is separated from who we are. We spoke about last week. That doesn't define me. But who are we? What defines me? I am pure. This is such a powerful idea. No matter what a person does, there'll always be the soul you have put into me is pure. My core identity always remains pure. I have a core of spirituality within me, and I can infuse this world with divine awareness. I like to, at this point, so really emotional video. This video was going around a couple weeks ago. It's a video of someone by the name of Yehuda Bicher. Yehuda Bicher was a young man going to sea, and he was killed. He was killed in the Nova Festival. He was one of the I believe it was 270 people that were killed in the festival, and it came out after he was killed. Video he took of himself a couple of days before he was killed, and he's singing this song. He's singing this song of Elokai, the God that the soul you gave me is pure. I'll show this video now, and again, I believe it's me, it was a very powerful video.
נשמה שנתת בי והוריי אתה בראתה אתה יצרת אתה נפחת בי ואתה משמרה בקרבי ואתה עתיד לתלה ממני ולחסיר הבלעדי תבוא כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי מודה אני לפניך אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי ריבון כל המעשים אדון כל הנשמות ריבון כל המעשים אדון כל הנשמות.
There we have a video of someone, and again, he was killed tragically a couple days later. And what I find beautiful about the video is you see someone doesn't look like he's a religious person, not wearing a yarmulke, not wearing tzitzis, and yet what he's saying resonates so strongly that a person may not be religious or may not have I don't know who this person is, and I don't know his life choices, but a person may not make the best choices throughout their life, but ultimately, as he's singing so beautifully. The soul you gave me is tahor, is pure. Because ultimately, we are not defined by our physicality and not defined even by our thought, speech, and action. That is our expressions. That is external to us. But ultimately, if you dig deeper, what do we have? We have the 10 sefirot imprinted in our. We'll always have that. And therefore, it's always important. It's always important to remember this. We all go through our struggles in life. But it's always important to remember with our struggles and with our failures in life, we have a piece of God inside of us. We have this piece of Atzilut, the 10 Sefirot, which God imprinted and made this world, and God made us in that way. The Karliner, Karliner Rebbe, I say this many times. The Karliner Rebbe says the biggest sin a person can do is by believing they are a sinner. In other words, by defining yourself as, who am I? I am a sinner. Does a person sometimes do wrong things, sins? Of course. That's not who we are. And this is the first message we recognize by when we understand the way of creation and how God created this world through the 10 Sefirot. And we mirror that. That's the first thing we have to walk away with, that we are always pure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, different ways of saying it, but as your Kabbalah says, you dig deeper, you get to the deeper part of the person. You want to call it the unconscious self, we're always going to be pure. Yes. That is one takeaway from this idea, this concept of Atzilut and the 10 Sefirot. The second one is going to be a little bit closer to what Karen was asking before about, can we find ourselves in the 10 Sefirot? And the answer is absolutely. This is something which a person is supposed to do. I want to go to exercise 2.1. And this is the exercise, not going to do it loud, but you could take a few seconds to, again, you have rate yourselves using the following scale. Very dominant, somewhat dominant, neutral, somewhat weak, or very weak. You have those areas in the column of chesed, which is generous, kind, loving, extroverted, optimistic, forgiving. That is in the chesed. Then you have in the gevura, frugal, exacting, respectful, introverted, realistic, perfectionist. These are all traits which are more gevura type of traits. The second idea that we are going to explore tonight is that some people, every single one of us, were created with a 10 Sefirot. However, just like you have a child and two children, both get the DNA from the parent. So one is a lot more like the father, and one is a lot more like the mother. One looks a lot more, I have a few children. Everyone says Mendel looks just like me. Dover looks just like Goldie. Because everyone, although Dover has my DNA, but obviously, at least in the area of looks, Goldie's DNA is a lot more dominant than my DNA. So too, every single one of us have a configuration of the 10 Sefirot. And by some people, Chesed may be more dominant. Other people, Gevura may be more dominant, and vice versa. So we have all the 10, but our tendencies help us recognize where our soul is more dominant. What you have your tendencies, that tells you if you are more of a chesed person, if you are more of a gevura person. We don't really have, we go back to our root. Each soul is particularly rooted in one individual sphere. I'm not sure why I'm saying this, I think it's a mistake. Every soul has all 10 Sefirot, but each soul has certain Sefirot which are more dominant than other Sefirot. And we're not going to have time, we have 10 minutes left, we're not going to have time to go through all the Sefirot and what they mean. But if you go to page 62, you'll see that there has, again, we have all of the 10 different Sefirot, and it tells us different tendencies which correspond to that Sefirah. If you are able to go and able to make an honest assessment, what are those traits which are more to do with my tendencies? You are then able to see where are you more, what are you more, which Sefirah is more dominant in your soul. And again, we all have the 10 Sefirot, but some are more dominant than others. And this gives a certain depth to a certain story. It's a famous story, which I've said before, and that is, I don't know if you want to call it a story, an anecdote. Reb Zusha of Anapoli, one of the great Hasidic masters, would say, when I go up to heaven, I'm not going to be scared for them to say, why weren't you like Moshe Rabbeinu? Why weren't you like Miriam? What I'm going to worry about, they're going to ask you, why weren't you what Zusha could do? What's the depth of this story? Because only Zusha could be Zusha. Only you are able to accomplish because you have a certain of the Sephirot, a certain configuration. And based on that configuration is what you should be focusing on. Mark Twain once has a line. He says, "Be yourself, because everyone else is already taken." So often we try to be someone else. We try to. No, that person's doing that. Maybe I should do that. But when we look at the 10 Sephirot, and every single one of us was configured with a certain strength, a certain tendency, and this tells us what we should be doing in our life. Going back to the beginning of the class, we asked, how do we know what we should be focusing on? Over here, once we understand that we were created with the 10 Sephirot, based on our tendencies, based on our strong points, that tells us this is our mission in life. So a person has to take an honest assessment. Now, sometimes a person may not know. One person may have to go to someone else. This is the idea of having a mentor, having a friend to tell you, what is your strong points? My strong point, if that's my strong point, that's what I should be focusing on. And that's why it was a mistake for this businessman to be going and helping out this pull out from the mud. That's not his strong point. He should have called someone else to do it. He lost the plot. That's not what he was supposed to be doing. And this is the second takeaway. When we are trying to figure out what our mission in life is, using the guide of the 10 Sephirot, which everyone has, we are then able to take that and give us direction in life. Let's take a look at this slide. I will not be asked why I wasn't like the great righteous people. I'll be asked why I wasn't Zusha. Let's take a look. A beautiful text number 16. Andrea, go ahead. Beautiful text over here. Follow inside. So here we have, again, a very practical idea, using the guide of the 10 Sephirot. And again, on a lack of time, we could have a whole probably 6-week course just going through the 10 Sephirot. And what is each one what each one represents. But even again, going through page 62, getting a general sense of person's strengths and weaknesses, that will give you a better idea what your mission in life should be. But finally, the last takeaway, the last idea over here, and this is going to kind of throw a wrench in what we just said. And that is, generally, this is the way. Generally, what you're supposed to do in life is supposed to be based upon a person's tendency, because that's what tells you God created you with this dominant Sephira, and that's how you should live your life. But there are times in life that we are tested. And that is, we are tested and we have to go against our nature. Sometimes there comes something our way. And although this may not be our nature, this is a test to be able to, for God to see. Are you able to sometimes go against your nature? Do that which is not easy. So last week, the end of Parshas Vayera, the Torah portion, we read about the story of the Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And this is considered a very great zechut, very great. Now, what is it? Why is it such a great merit? There are many people throughout our history that gave up their lives, even gave up their children's lives. But Chassidus and Kabbalah explain. What was Abraham? Chesed, giving. This was a test of gevura, of strength. Over here, Avram had to go, and again, Avram epitomized the idea of chesed. And over here, Avram had to do the ultimate act of gevura, of taking his own son who he loved and bringing up for to God. This was a test. And this was God saying, even though generally you live your life in the way of chesed, and that's what Avram did, and that's positive. There are times in life where we have to put that to the side and say, right now, although this is against my nature, I have to stand up against it. This is what's needed at this point. And I have to be willing to go against my nature. And this is the final takeaway. That, so again, although generally in life our mission is based upon our tendencies, it's based upon the sephira we are more dominant in. But there are certain times in life we are tested and told, go against our nature. We see this in text number 18. We spoke about before, Shammai. What was Shammai? Gevura. Remember, Hillel was the chesed. Shammai was the person who faced away the prospective convert. Text number 18. Shammai would say, make your Torah study a permanent fixture of your daily schedule. Say little and do much. Again, those are both, goes according to his way of Gevura. What does he finish on? And receive every human with a pleasant countenance. What is he ending off here? Although I'm by nature more of a Gevura type of person, but I recognize this is an area in my life where I'm being tested and I have to go and be pleasant, even though it may not come naturally. So although, again, generally in life, we go according to our tendencies, our nature, our strong points. That tells you, if God gave you a talent in a certain area, that tells you this is your dominant sephira, and this is how you should lead your life. Although there are points, and again, it's not always easy to recognize when it's a test and when we have to go against our nature. That's why, again, you may need a mentor for that. You may need a good friend to help you out with that. But there are times in life where we have to say, although this is my tendency, although naturally I'm not inclined to this is my calling for this moment. I like to finish off with one story. Yesterday, I flew out of LaGuardia. So in the 1930s, there was a mayor of New York, Theorello LaGuardia. He actually was Jewish. His father was not Jewish. His mother was Jewish. Thank God they recently upgraded the airport. But they say a story of he one time went to night court. Night court, and you may have heard the story. Went to night court and he told the judge who was there, tonight I'm going to be the judge. And what was the story? He said there was a baker that was bringing this elderly lady, this older grandmother, who stole a few loaves of bread, some food, which totaled $10. And the Mayor LaGuardia, turns to this lady and says, "Do you steal?" She says, "Yes, I think you steal it because I'm bringing up my grandchildren, and I don't have any money to be able to feed grandchildren. The only way I could do it is by stealing some food." And the mayor turns to the baker and says, "I understand. Still, laws have to be laws. You stole $10. Has to pay that back." So, what did LaGuardia say? So Mayor LaGuardia said as follows: she stole $10. She has to pay $10. However, the fact that our city can reach this important stage where a grandmother, the only way she could feed her grandchildren is by stealing. This is something which shows on every single one of us over here. And therefore, she has to pay $10. But I am fining everyone in this courtroom 50 cents because we have reached this stage. They collected from everyone $20, $10 to be able to pay back the baker. and $10 if she failed to have some food, failed to buy for her grandchildren. And why do I find the story so beautiful? Because if there was just chesed, what would he say? So $10, it's fine. You have to give to her. Gevura would be, he sold $10, has to pay $10. Meir LaGuardia used to ferret a combination. Said, I see what she did. I see what happened. So therefore, she has to pay the $10. But because of her situation, let us be able to gather together and raise some money for her to pay back with a little surplus. And this is using the different sefirot that we have to be able to lead our life. And sometimes you have to use chesed, sometimes you have to use gevura, and sometimes you have to use a combination of the two. Based on our personality, that will direct us in the way we go through life. Okay, we're going to finish now. Yes. I want to, again, it's over for now. Everyone's welcome to go. I'm going to show a video which acts as a little recap again. I know it's already 9:03, so you're welcome to leave now. You're also welcome to stay for...
Welcome to the second video in our captivating series, where we continue our journey through the mystical realms of the Kabbalistic system. In our previous video, we delved into the worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya, exploring three existences that feel independent of God. Today, we venture into a divine world. Welcome to Atzilut. To truly grasp the world of Atzilut, let us ponder a basic question about God. On the one hand, our sages referred to God as the Holy One, blessed be He, choosing the word holy to emphasize that God is infinite, transcending specific and definable qualities. On the other hand, the Torah describes God as bearing specific attributes: kind, merciful, compassionate, to name a few. So, which is it? Does God have specific praiseworthy characteristics, or is He beyond any description? Allow me to clarify this through an analogy. Imagine you're a brilliant scientist entering a classroom to convey your theory to a group of teenagers. The problem is that your idea is too abstract and complex for these young minds. So you ponder, rethink, and finally find a relatable detail within your theory that you successfully share with the students. In this example, there are two different levels within your single mind. There's your default mind, operating when teaching your elite students, and a second layer of your mind that produces a simplified version that the teenagers can understand. Here's the crucial point. Both levels are your mind. The Kabbalists use this parable to help us understand a divine truth. Yes, God is infinite and beyond description, but this absolute infinity includes the capacity for finite expression and specific attributes. Why? Because if we were to claim that God lacks this ability, it would imply a limitation, and God is without any limitations. But this only means that God's infinity includes the potential for finite expression. A potential does not imply actual definable attributes. That's why there's a second important step here. Kabbalah reveals that God chose to actualize His capacity to be finite, giving birth to 10 definable expressions known as sefirot, numbered entities. It's like the teacher who doesn't suffice with having the potential to reach young minds, but actually gets into the classroom and relates the deep ideas to the simple minds. That's the mystical secret behind the sefirot. True, they are not God's essence, but on the other hand, they are God's attributes. They don't feel as though they are outside of God. That's why we refer to them as Elokut, godliness. And that's why we call this world Atzilut, which derives from the word Eitzel, meaning together with God. Now, you might be wondering how this relates to us. Our souls originate in Atzilut, and our soul's powers are the mirror image of these 10 divine attributes. Each morning, as we engage in prayer, we remind ourselves of this fundamental truth. The soul you have put into me is pure. We reconnect with our Atzilut identity. This realization serves as a profound inspiration to infuse more spirituality into our lives. It tells us that we possess the power to pursue the path of the divine, and that this is our truest identity. This understanding also empowers us to make a tangible impact on the world around us. Our souls are deeply rooted in Atzilut, a realm of complete divine identity. Therefore, we have the ability to introduce positive change and foster greater awareness of the divine in our immediate surroundings. So let us discover our connection to this divine world and harness the power it bestows upon us. Remember, you are a vessel of divine light, capable of making a profound difference.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, joining.